Hello, everyone. This is Nengshi from the Ohio State University. I'm glad to present our work entitled GNN-Surrogate, a hierarchical and adaptive graph neural network for parameter space exploration of unstructured mesh ocean simulations. In oceanography, scientists usually run ensemble simulations given different input parameters to perform parameter space analysis. For example, MPass Ocean is an ocean model of unstructured grids, and oceanographers would control input parameters of interest to analyze output fields, such as temperature shown here. And scientific visualization is a very useful tool to help scientists explore the simulation output efficiently and intuitively. However, the simulation space exploration requires exhausting the complicated parameter space by running a batch of computationally expensive simulations. To make the parameter space exploration efficient, scientists exploit surrogate models to mimic the original expensive simulation model. And the existing surrogate model-based parameter space analysis in our visualization community usually are either image-based, such as InstructuredNet, or focus on regular grid, such as NNVA, which leads to two limitations. First, image-based surrogate models, they usually visualize the generated simulation data with several predefined visual mappings, so that scientists are not able to adjust the setting of visual mappings to find features of interest after the models have been trained. Second, existing regular grid-based methods, they do not directly work for unstructured data, since they would learn the mappings between the simulation parameters and the raw simulation data on regular grids. In this work, to solve the two limitations mentioned above, we present a graph neural network, GNN-based method to predict the raw data on unstructured grids given simulation parameters. Before talking about our method, let me first give an MPass Ocean model background. MPass Ocean is a model for describing and evaluating the ocean, as shown here. It exploits unstructured meshes for enhancing the resolution at regions of interest. And as the figure shows, in Earth science, the directions perpendicular to and consistent with the gravity are defined as horizontal and vertical, respectively. In MPass Ocean model, the oceans are divided both horizontally and vertically by oceanographers. The horizontal grids depend on Voronoi tessellations, and some variables of interest, such as temperature, are stored at Voronoi polygon cell centers. Vertically, to model the 3D ocean, scientists scale and copy the Voronoi polygons to different depth levels. Now let's start talking about our method. First, from MPass Ocean meshes, we build an original graph G0, and here V0 is the node set, E0 is the edge set. In a node set V0, a node is the Voronoi polygon center cell center, where a cell-centered variable, such as temperature, is defined. Second, the edge set V0, E0 can be decomposed into two groups. The first group contains horizontal edges. These horizontal edges are formed by a node and its horizontal neighbors across the cell walls. The second group contains vertical edges. These vertical edges are formed by a node and its vertical neighbors. Next, for efficient training, we generate hierarchical graphs from the original graph by a graph coarsening process, where coarse graphs in the graph hierarchy help GNN-Surrogate to capture the global phenomenon quickly. The graph coarsening operation receives an input graph and outputs the next level coarser graph. In our work, we use a distance-based edge matching algorithm following the first law of geography. And here, Let's take a 2D planar graph as an example to illustrate the edge matching algorithm. Given a graph, all the nodes are initially marked as unvisited. We try to match a node that has not been visited with its nearest neighbor and generate one supernode in the next coarser graph. The supernode's position is the two matched nodes circle point. For example, here, node 0 is matched with node 1, and the supernode 7 is generated. Node 2 is matched with node 3, and the supernode 8 is generated. If a node has no unvisited neighbor, we copy it to the next coarser level as the supernode. For example, the node 4 has no unvisited neighbor, so we directly copy it to the next coarser graph as node 9. Finally, node 5 is matched with node 6, and the supernode 10 is generated. Now we have all the nodes set up in the coarser graph. The next step would try to generate edges in the coarser graph. The solution is like that. Given two supernodes A and B in the coarser graph, if one of A's children and one of B's children are neighbors, then A and B would be considered as neighbors, and the edges are linked between them. We repeat the coarsening process until we are left with one single node in the coarser graph. For example, as shown in the figure, starting from the original graph G0, we repeatedly generate G1, G2, and G3. We also store all the parent-children links during the graph coarsening process and construct a tree called the graph hierarchical tree. The right figure shows the graph hierarchical tree from the coarsening process illustrated before. The graph hierarchical tree is used for a final transformation process to decide the final graphs used in our GNN-Surrogate. So you may want to ask, why do we need the graph transformation? This is because for ocean ensemble simulations, as input parameters change, severe changes would only occur in some sub-areas, which means we can represent the other insensitive regions with low resolutions. And here's what we do. As shown in the figure, we first run N1 simulations, and we select the majority of the simulation outputs as the reference. And we compare the simulation outputs with the reference for the residual field to model region sensitivities to the input parameters. We use these residual fields to perform graph transformation, whose detail is shown next. And we use adaptive resolutions to represent these residuals instead of full resolution. Here, we show the graph transformation process. As the figure shows, we have the original graph G0 and the constructed graph hierarchical tree. Assume that for all the residuals calculated before, we perform a tree cutting on the graph hierarchical tree, shown by the orange line. The details of our cutting policy can be found in our paper. Our policy is like that. Nodes being cut are replaced by their lowest remaining ancestor. For example, in the transformed graph G0 prime, nodes 0 and 1 are replaced by their parent 7. Nodes 2 and 3 are replaced by their parent node 8. And node 4 is replaced by its parent node 9. We almost done all the pre-processing operations, and we are close to our training stage. We just run more simulations and collect more adaptive resolution output and can start the training process. Our GNN-Surrogate generator takes the simulation parameters as input and outputs the adaptive resolution residual data. Remind that the residual are calculated from subtracting a selected and stored ensemble member. And here, as the figure shows, a forward pass in our GNN-Surrogate contains 3 steps. First, the input parameter are fed into fully connected layers to generate a latent vector. Second, the latent vector is reshaped to a feature map on the closest graph. Third, the subsequent residual blocks perform super resolution. We compare the predicted adaptive resolution residual with the ground truth by a L1 loss and use gradient descent to update the network parameters. The residual block contains graph convolution and graph upsampling. These are 2 very important operators in the generator, which are going to be explained next. Let's talk about graph convolution. The right figure shows the graph convolution for a node V02 in graph G0. The output feature is computed from a weighted sum of input features on node V02 and all its neighbors. The graph convolution details can be found in our paper. The next important operator is graph upsampling. After graph upsampling, the output features on a node are equal to features on its parent. For example, after upsampling G2 to G1, features on node 7 and 10 are equal to features on node 11. And the features on node 8 and node 9 are equal to features on node 12. In the inference stage, we use GNN-Surrogate to predict the simulation output given new simulation parameters. Here, a new simulation input parameter setting is fed into GNN-Surrogate. After a forward pass, we obtain an adaptive resolution residual. We convert the adaptive resolution residual to a residual with the full resolution by nearest neighbor upsampling. Finally, we add the stored reference ensemble member back to the residual to get the predicted simulation data with full resolution. Also, inspired by previous works GNVR and InstruNet, we exploit GNN-Surrogate's differentiability to perform sensitivity analysis on simulation parameters. We evaluate our method on MPath Ocean dataset. We first visualize the predicted simulation data by horizontal temperature maps. We compare the predicted result with the ground truth and baseline methods. The images shown here shows that our method has minimal difference to the ground truth compared with other methods. Next, we visualize the vertical cross-section temperature maps. Here is the vertical cross-section at the equator and at 75 degrees east longitude. Finally, we visualize the isothermal layer depth maps. Here shows the isothermal layer depth maps with temperature ISO value equals to 25 degrees Celsius. After training, a single forward pass through our trained GNN-Surrogate takes less than 2 seconds, instead of the roughly 15 minutes it would take to directly compute the simulation output on a large cluster of CPUs. In our case study, an oceanographer examined how BWSA, the most sensitive parameter, affects the ocean temperature. He fixed other parameters and sampled the BWSA from a set of 0, 1, 3, 5. He first visualized the sea surface temperature map. Based on the observation, as he increased the BWSA, the equatorial cold tongues in the Eastern Pacific is significantly enhanced. He thought one reason is that the increased wind leads to the upwelling of colder subsurface water along the equator due to the Colorado's force. To verify his point, he rendered the East Pacific equatorial cross-section from the sea level to a depth of 200 meters. We can see that as the wind stress becomes stronger, more cold water in the deeper ocean is upwelled to the surface. In conclusion, we propose GNN-Surrogate, a hierarchical and adaptive graph neural network for parameter space exploration of unstructured mesh ocean simulations. We give comprehensive quantitative and qualitative evaluations to demonstrate the effectiveness and efficiency of GNN-Surrogate on MPAS ocean dataset. Thanks for your listening. We also thank our funding providers. Now I can take some questions.